Growing up, Ethan Parker learned a painful lesson long before he understood what betrayal truly meant. In his family, the truth didn't matter. What mattered was who people wanted to believe, and they always believed his younger sister, Olivia. From the outside, the Parker family looked perfect. They lived in a beautiful house, owned a successful family business, and appeared to be the kind of family everyone envied. But behind closed doors, Ethan knew a very different reality. Olivia was the golden child. Ethan was the scapegoat. If a vase broke, Ethan was blamed. If money went missing from a wallet, Ethan was questioned. If Olivia failed a test, somehow Ethan had distracted her. Their parents never bothered to investigate. They never asked questions. They simply assumed Ethan was responsible. At first, he thought things would change. He thought if he worked harder, got better grades, and stayed out of trouble, his parents would finally see him for who he was. But year after year, nothing changed. The turning point came when Ethan was 12 years old. One afternoon, his father stormed into his bedroom holding a missing gold watch. "There it is," his father shouted. Ethan looked up from his homework, confused. The expensive watch had somehow appeared inside his backpack. His mother stood behind his father with disappointment written across her face. "I can't believe you'd steal from your own family," she said. "But I didn't," Ethan cried. His parents refused to listen. He was grounded for a month. A week later, Ethan accidentally overheard Olivia bragging to one of her friends on the phone. "I put the watch in his bag myself." She laughed. "He gets blamed for everything anyway." Ethan stood frozen outside her room. His heart shattered. The worst part wasn't what Olivia had done. It was knowing his parents would never believe him even if he told them. That night, Ethan started a folder on an old laptop. He named it simply Proof. Whenever he was falsely accused, he documented everything. Screenshots, photos, emails, text messages, receipts, voice recordings, anything that could prove what really happened. At first it felt silly, but as the years passed, the folder grew larger and larger and larger. By the time Ethan graduated high school, it contained hundreds of files. Every lie, every accusation, every moment his parents chose Olivia over him, the folder became his silent witness. A record of truths nobody wanted to hear. Eventually, Ethan moved out. He earned a business degree, started his own consulting company, and built a life far away from the constant blame and disappointment. For the first time, he felt free. He rarely visited home. Family dinners became holiday obligations rather than meaningful gatherings. Still, despite everything, a small part of him hoped his parents might someday change. Maybe they would finally realize how unfairly they had treated him. Maybe they would apologize. Maybe they would become the family he always wished he had. But some people never change. 3 weeks before his 32nd birthday, Ethan received a call that would destroy those hopes forever. His father's voice sounded panicked. "Ethan, where are you?" "At work." "Why?" "Get to the house now." The line went dead. Confused, Ethan drove across town. When he arrived, police cars were parked outside. His stomach tightened. Inside, 2 officers stood in the living room. His mother was crying. His father looked furious. Olivia sat on the couch pretending to wipe tears from her eyes. "What happened?" Ethan asked. His father stepped forward. $89,000 is missing from the company account. Ethan blinked. "What?" The room fell silent. Then his mother pointed directly at him. "We know you took it." For a moment, Ethan thought it was a joke. A terrible joke. Then he saw the officers watching him carefully, saw the hatred in his father's eyes, saw Olivia lowering her head to hide the tiny smile forming on her lips, and suddenly Ethan understood. The missing money wasn't the real problem. They had already chosen their culprit, just like they always had. And for the first time in his life, The consequences would be far bigger than a broken vase or a missing watch. Someone had stolen $89,000, and his own family had decided to frame him for it. As the police officer stepped toward him and asked him to answer a few questions, Ethan felt something inside him break. Because deep down, he knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a betrayal, and it was only the beginning. The days following the accusation became the darkest period of Ethan Parker's life. What hurt most wasn't the police investigation. It wasn't the whispers spreading through town. It wasn't even the possibility of criminal charges. It was the fact that his own family had abandoned him without hesitation. The moment the missing $89,000 was discovered, his parents had already decided he was guilty. No evidence, no investigation, no questions, just blame, the same blame he had lived with since childhood. Only this time, the stakes were much higher. As detectives questioned him, Ethan cooperated fully. He provided bank statements, work records, phone logs, and anything else they requested. He had nothing to hide, but every time he tried to explain himself, his parents seemed determined to make him look guilty. His father told investigators that Ethan had always been jealous of Olivia. His mother claimed Ethan had struggled financially in recent years. Neither statement was true. In fact, Ethan's consulting business had been thriving, but lies repeated often enough started sounding believable, especially when they came from parents. News of the accusation spread quickly. Family members began calling. At first, Ethan hoped someone would listen to his side. Instead, he found judgment waiting on the other end of every conversation. His aunt told him she was disappointed. His uncle said he should admit what he had done. Several cousins stopped responding to his messages altogether. People he had known his entire life suddenly treated him like a criminal. One evening, Ethan walked into his favorite coffee shop, the same place he had visited for years. The conversations around him instantly grew quiet. A few people looked away. Others stared openly. The humiliation was unbearable. He grabbed his coffee and left without saying a word. Outside, he sat alone in his car and stared through the windshield. For the first time in years, tears filled his eyes. Not because he was afraid, because he was exhausted. Exhausted from defending himself. Exhausted from being blamed. Exhausted from hoping people would finally see the truth. Meanwhile, Olivia played her role perfectly. She cried during family gatherings. She posted emotional messages online about family betrayal. She told relatives how heartbroken she was that her own brother could do something so terrible. Everyone comforted her. Everyone supported her. Everyone believed her. Watching it unfold made Ethan sick. A week later, his parents demanded he attend a family meeting. Against his better judgment, he agreed. Maybe, he thought, this was finally their chance to listen. Maybe they wanted to hear his side. The moment he entered the dining room, he knew he had been wrong. The atmosphere felt like a trial. His parents sat at one end of the table. Olivia sat beside them. Several relatives filled the remaining chairs. Nobody smiled. Nobody welcomed him. His father immediately began speaking. "You need to confess." Ethan stared at him. "Confess to something I didn't do." His mother shook her head. "We're trying to help you. Help me." Ethan laughed bitterly. "You're accusing me?" Olivia suddenly began crying. "I don't understand why you'd hurt us like this." Ethan looked directly at her. For a brief moment he noticed something, not sadness, not fear, guilt. It flashed across her face for less than a second before disappearing. Then another memory surfaced. 3 years earlier, Olivia had secretly borrowed thousands of dollars from relatives and never repaid them. Their parents had quietly covered the debt. 2 years before that, she had forged a signature on company paperwork. Their parents had buried the incident. Again and again, they had protected her, no matter what she did. As the argument continued, Ethan realized something terrifying. His parents weren't ignoring evidence. They were avoiding it. Deep down, they already knew Olivia was capable of stealing the money. They simply refused to face the truth. Because protecting Olivia mattered more than justice, more than honesty, more than their own son. That realization shattered the final piece of love Ethan still carried for them. The meeting ended with accusations, shouting, and slammed doors. For the first time in his life, Ethan walked away without trying to defend himself. There was no point anymore. The next morning, he began packing old boxes stored in his apartment closet. He planned to move forward and cut ties completely. While sorting through dusty belongings, he discovered an old laptop. The same laptop he had owned when he was 12. His heart skipped a beat. Slowly, he powered it on. Minutes later, a familiar folder appeared on the screen. Proof, thousands of files filled the folder. Screenshots, photos, messages, recordings, years of carefully preserved evidence, the forgotten record of every lie his family had ever told. Ethan spent hours reviewing the contents, and as he looked through file after file, a realization began forming. The folder contained far more than painful memories. It contained a pattern, a history, a trail leading directly to the truth. For the first time since the accusation, hope returned. Because if his family wanted a war, they had just made one critical mistake. They had forgotten that Ethan had been collecting evidence since he was 12 years old, and now he was finally ready to use it. For 3 straight nights, Ethan barely slept. His apartment was silent except for the soft hum of his laptop and the occasional turning of pages as he sorted through years of evidence. The folder he had created at 12 years old was far larger than he remembered. What had started as a desperate attempt by a hurt child to prove his innocence had evolved into something much more powerful. It was a timeline, a record, a map of deception spanning 2 decades. Every screenshot, recording, email, and photograph told the same story. Olivia lied, his parents protected her, and Ethan paid the price. The more he reviewed the files, the more obvious the pattern became. When Olivia damaged a neighbor's car at 16, Ethan was blamed. When company inventory disappeared years later, his father accused Ethan before quietly discovering Olivia had sold the items online. When Olivia forged signatures on financial documents, their parents buried the incident to avoid embarrassment. Each event seemed small on its own. Together, they revealed something terrifying. His family had spent years sacrificing him to protect Olivia. By the 4th day, Ethan realized he couldn't fight this battle alone. The accusation of stealing $89,000 wasn't just destroying his reputation. It could destroy his future. If he wanted justice, he needed professional help. That afternoon, he contacted a respected attorney named Marcus Bennett. After listening to Ethan's story, Marcus agreed to review the evidence. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the law office carrying multiple external hard drives and printed documents. Marcus spent nearly 6 hours examining everything. As the day progressed, his expression changed from curiosity to disbelief. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "This is one of the most detailed personal evidence collections I've ever seen." Ethan remained silent. Marcus tapped several files on the screen. More importantly, this establishes a clear history of false accusations and family cover-ups. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt someone actually believed him, but Marcus wasn't finished. "If we're going to expose the truth about the missing money, we'll need more than history. What do you suggest we follow the money?" A few days later, Marcus brought in a forensic accountant named Rachel Lawson. Rachel specialized in tracing hidden financial transactions. Unlike the police investigation, which had focused primarily on Ethan, Rachel examined everyone connected to the family business, including Olivia. Within 2 weeks, shocking information began surfacing. Several transfers had been made from the company account before the $89,000 disappeared. The money had moved through multiple accounts in an attempt to hide its origin. At first glance, the transactions appeared unrelated. But Rachel kept digging. Eventually, she uncovered a connection. One account belonged to a luxury credit card company. Another was tied to an online gambling platform. Both accounts were linked directly to Olivia. Ethan stared at the report in disbelief. The evidence was stronger than he had imagined, but there was more. While searching through older files in his folder, Ethan discovered recordings he had almost forgotten existed. One recording captured a conversation from years earlier. His mother and father were discussing money that Olivia had secretly taken from a business account. Instead of reporting it, they agreed to replace the funds themselves. Another recording revealed them planning how to explain away missing inventory that Olivia had sold. The recordings were devastating. Not only did they prove Olivia had stolen before, but they showed his parents knowingly covering up her actions. Marcus immediately added the files to the case. The legal strategy began coming together. Every piece of evidence reinforced the same conclusion. Olivia had both the motive and history to commit the theft. His parents had a long record of protecting her, and Ethan had become the convenient scapegoat once again. As investigators received the new information, their attention shifted dramatically. Questions that had once been directed at Ethan were now aimed at Olivia. The family that had confidently blamed him began showing signs of panic. His father suddenly stopped answering calls. His mother avoided public appearances. Olivia deleted social media posts and changed phone numbers. They knew the truth was getting closer. 3 weeks later, a court hearing was scheduled to review the evidence. The courtroom was packed. Relatives, business associates, neighbors, even local reporters. Everyone wanted to know what would happen. As Ethan entered the courtroom, he noticed his parents sitting beside Olivia. For the first time, they looked nervous. Marcus stood and began presenting the evidence: transaction records, financial reports, witness statements. Recordings, one by one, the pieces fell into place. The confidence slowly disappeared from Olivia's face. The tears she had used to gain sympathy no longer appeared. Instead, she looked terrified. When the judge reviewed the financial trail connecting the missing money to Olivia's accounts, the entire room fell silent. The evidence was impossible to ignore. Ethan sat quietly as years of lies began collapsing around the people who had created them. Then the judge spoke words that changed everything. Based on the evidence presented today, this court orders a full criminal investigation into the financial activities of Olivia Parker and all individuals who may have assisted in concealing these transactions. A wave of shock spread through the courtroom. His parents looked horrified. Olivia turned pale. And for the first time in his life, Ethan wasn't the one being blamed. The truth was finally catching up to them. And this time, there would be nowhere left to hide. For years, people had spoken over him, doubted him, and judged him without hearing the full story. Now, as the investigation expanded and the evidence continued to pile up, those same people sat in silence, waiting for the truth they had ignored for so long. The judge's order triggered a full forensic investigation into the Parker family finances. Within weeks, investigators uncovered everything. The missing $89,000 had been stolen by Olivia. The money had been funneled through several accounts before being used to cover gambling losses, luxury purchases, and personal debts she had hidden from everyone. The evidence was overwhelming. bank transfers, credit card records, account logins, digital footprints. Every trail led back to her. There was no explanation, no excuse, no escape. The woman who had spent years pretending to be the innocent victim was finally exposed. When detectives confronted Olivia with the evidence, her story changed repeatedly. First, she denied everything. Then she blamed a friend. Then she claimed the transfers were mistakes. Finally, faced with proof she couldn't explain away, she confessed. The confession sent shockwaves through the family, but Olivia wasn't the only one facing consequences. Investigators also discovered that Ethan's parents had knowingly provided false statements during the original investigation. They had withheld information about Olivia's history of theft. They had ignored evidence pointing toward her. Most damaging of all, they had actively encouraged authorities to focus on Ethan despite knowing their daughter had stolen money before. What they thought was parental protection became criminal obstruction. The couple who spent years protecting one child had ultimately destroyed their own credibility. News spread quickly. The story that once painted Ethan as a thief now painted him as a victim. Local newspapers published corrections. Business associates who had quietly distanced themselves suddenly reached out with apologies. Relatives who had refused to answer his calls began sending messages asking for forgiveness. His aunt cried during a phone call. His uncle admitted he had judged him unfairly. Several cousins confessed they regretted believing the accusations. But the apologies came too late. The damage had already been done. Years of trust couldn't be rebuilt with a few words. As legal proceedings continued, Ethan filed a defamation lawsuit against those responsible for falsely accusing him and damaging his reputation. The evidence in his folder became the foundation of the case. What began as a collection of childhood memories transformed into the most important record of his life. Every screenshot, every recording, every saved message, all of it proved a pattern of behavior stretching back decades. The court recognized the emotional and financial harm Ethan had suffered. Months later, he was awarded a substantial settlement. Ironically, the same family that tried to ruin him ended up funding the new life he would build without them. Meanwhile, the Parker family name collapsed under public scrutiny. Their business struggled. Former supporters disappeared. People who once admired them now questioned everything they had ever claimed. For the first time, Ethan's parents experienced what he had endured for years. The pain of being judged, the pain of losing trust, the pain of facing consequences. One rainy afternoon, nearly a year after the investigation began, Ethan received a message from his mother. She wanted to meet. After much thought, he agreed. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe. His parents looked older than he remembered. Tired, broken, defeated. His mother cried before she could even speak. His father stared at the table. Finally, his mother whispered the words Ethan had waited his entire life to hear. "We were wrong." The apology that should have come years earlier now felt strangely empty. His father slowly nodded. "We failed you." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Ethan spoke calmly. "I spent my childhood trying to earn your love. Neither parent could meet his eyes. I spent my adulthood trying to earn your trust." Tears rolled down his mother's face. "And when I needed you most, you chose her again." Neither of them argued because they knew it was true. They asked for forgiveness, but forgiveness and reconciliation were not the same thing. Ethan chose to let go of his anger. Not for them, for himself. Holding on to hatred would only keep him trapped in the past, but he also chose not to return to the family that had betrayed him. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Over the following years, Ethan used part of his settlement to create a foundation dedicated to helping young people who faced false accusations, emotional abuse, and family injustice. He wanted others to know they weren't alone. He wanted them to have the support he never had. The foundation became successful. Thousands of lives were impacted. And every time someone thanked him for helping them find their voice, Ethan remembered the 12-year-old boy who started a folder called Proof because nobody believed him. That boy had felt powerless, forgotten, alone, but in the end, the truth he carefully protected for 20 years became stronger than every lie told against him. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. Not destroying the people who betrayed him, but surviving them, thriving without them, and proving that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way back into the light.